All right, so I'll welcome everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order as the deputy chair for this evening. The time is 7 p.m., 7:01 p.m. on Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together to a better future. All right. First, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated by Legislative Services? A mover and a seconder. All right, so moved by John and seconded by Joanne. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the agenda before we start? Should probably look at okay, so all in favor of this agenda going forward? Aye. All opposed? On that end, all right, that carries. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest before we start? Anyone else? Okay. All right, the minutes. May I please have a motion to receive the meeting minutes of the April 12th, 2023 meeting? All right, moved by Max and seconded by Joanne again. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes from last meeting? Nothing from that end, nothing here. Okay, so all in favor of who's receiving those meeting minutes? And any opposed? All right, that carries as well. We have no delegations this evening, so we can move into the matters for consideration right away. The first being the memorandum from the accessibility advisor regarding the site plan application CDM 2023-02, submission number 1, 115, 135, and 155 Addison Hall Circle. And for this one, is there a mover and a seconder? All right, so moved by John and seconded by Joanne as well. Great. Okay. Yeah. And okay, so I guess we're handing this over to Greg. Greg, would you like to speak to that? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't read the script exactly. We're handing it over to Greg.
No worries, Peter. Okay, so thank you. So our first property here that we're going to look at is an industrial building. So there's actually 3 industrial buildings here. So it spans over multiple addresses, which is why we have listed 115, 135, and 155. So again, we'll go through similar to last month. We'll go through an overview of the structure. We'll then cover the comments that have been submitted. And then should you all have any other comments or questions, we can definitely add it to the memo. So overall, this here's our property. We do have 3 rows of or columns of buildings, A, B, and C. each with their own address. As we start to clean this up, so here's a cleaner look of the units. So we have units 1 through 13 in the first column or row, 14 through to 26, and then 27 all the way up to 30. So 30 total units on this property. They're all relatively similar in size and similar in style. As we look at some of the, probably should zoom in a little, the plans, we do mainly industrial. So there are drive-in doors on one end of each unit. And then there is some facing on the sides, some windows and glass. As we look at the fronts of all the buildings, they are full industrial. So they are 2 stories tall, but looks proposed to be only 1 level of whatever they decide to put in there. And each unit has their own doorway and parking respective to each structure. So that is the property we're going to look at today. And I'm just going to come to this to get a little more detail here. So comments. So again, these are first submission. So we very well might see additional submissions after this. What we are not seeing here is detail as to what these properties or these units are going to be used for. Very well building industrial buildings. So it could be really anything at this point. In saying that, so comments listed, none of the plans, again, due to the detail, are showing any type of washroom on any level. So commenting that there should be a universal barrier-free path to the washroom, as well as a universal barrier-free washroom on the main level, to ensure proper tactile indicators at any of the staircases that are proposed, automatic door openers to all of the units, ensuring that the exterior path of travel here does exceed 1,500 millimeters or 1.5 meters without any obstructions. I like to add that line because they typically will measure from curb to wall and then put hydrants and hose bibs and planters and other stuff. So just to be extra clear. And then, of course, consideration for emergency evacuation chairs at any of the staircases that are proposed. So those are the comments that are listed based on the total number of parking spaces. They do have the appropriate required barrier-free parking spaces. And we're just going to zoom in a little more to see that detail. So we do have 2 spaces here with an access aisle and curb cut servicing A1 through to really A7. We do have an additional 2 spaces as well with an access aisle curb cut servicing, upwards of A5 down to really A13. So we do have these distances down here. As we move over to building B, which is 135, it is a very similar structure. So these barrier-free spots are actually closer down. So what they've done is staggered these spaces a little bit better on B and C as well. Right in the middle here, B4 and B5 and C5 and C6 have our barrier-free spaces. And as we look down, there is no additional barrier-free spots on the C building. Again, these are industrial type buildings with drive-in doors in the back. 2 stories are proposed. Very simple at this point. The only real staircases are, I believe, towards the back of the buildings. So as they have loading docks and ramps for trucks and that sort of thing, there would be the staircases at the back of the facility. The fronts of the facilities are level in these cases. So not a lot of staircases. It does not look like either, or any unit, I should say, has a second story attached to them. Looking at the fixtures, that is confirmed here. So we do have our loading doors and docks in the back, and those staircases out the back of the loading areas, which you can kind of see here on the side angle. And then the fronts are just two double doors that swing open, or outwards, I should say. And all of this light blue is glass, and the dark blue and the gray would be, I guess, the front facing of the building. And that is it for this plan.
All right. Does the committee have any questions or comments on this?
I know that there's a limit of parking spaces according to how many handicap spaces they put in.
Mhm.
But has that not changed at all over the years? To me, that doesn't seem like, you don't know how many people are going to be in that building. And it doesn't seem to me to be enough spaces for buildings that large, and especially 3 of them. And I just wondered if they've increased the amounts of spaces they need, that people that need assistance and need to be parked somewhere that they can get into the building.
So through you, there is the number of spaces hasn't really changed. It has increased when the accessibility standard, of course, came out, but it hasn't changed since. And our parking bylaw does follow the accessibility standard. What we are looking at this time is we do kind of separate, because of the distance of the facilities, we are separating the parking spaces. So we are taking each building, A, B, and C, separately when considering the total number of spaces. So of 33 spaces, I believe, if my math's correct, there's only really a need for 2 or 3 spots. So they are going above with having the 4 spaces per building. And then these 2 spots are back to back with building B and building C. We can always recommend more, but again, it would be a recommendation to have additional spaces. But at minimum, they are actually exceeding the minimum standard as they currently have laid out.
I just add something else.
Oh, please, yeah.
I just, it concerns me a lot because, for one thing, our population in general is aging. Probably not quite as much as it was maybe 7 years ago or so, but it is coming right up, and there's a lot of aging people. Also, the younger people are now being looked after to a degree of being able to obtain access to places and everything like that, the people that need it, that wasn't looked at before. So I don't know, I think we should take some initiative to look at doing the best we can for the circumstances.
Maybe if I can just add something on that note, for building C, is there, you might have mentioned this, but was there a reason why there weren't spaces on building C? On C.
Sorry,
Oh, is it up a little bit, maybe?
yeah, so there is 2 spaces
Oh,
at
there.
5 and
There
6.
they are.
Okay, yes.
Joanne, based on your comments, I did add to consider additional spaces down here. So directly across these 2 barrier-free spots, to consider 2 additional here by C10 and C11. So that way the C structure has 4 spaces, as does B and as does A. So
I think it's very, very good to do that, because as we go along, we're trying to make improvements to the community.
Mhm.
And I think that it should be carried across the whole board.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And as I mentioned earlier, at this point, it is an industrial type building.
And
And right now, it could be anything industrial to go in there. So we don't have the clarity as to exactly what will be in there or how they will be using those spaces. But we can definitely have them consider 2 additional spots.
Thank you.
I'm going to raise my own hand, and I wanted to ask about the double doors. So they open outwards. I'm not that familiar with code around those doors. Is it typical for them to open out? So I'm wondering, like with that narrow sidewalk, if you're in any sort of accessibility device, you can't really navigate around those doors to get in them without a curb cut at every single door.
Mhm.
So do they have to open out, or can they open inwards?
I believe they can. Typically, when entering, you would pull a door open and exiting push a door.
Right.
At which point, the way they have it here, I think, is common.
Right.
We could be having, sliding doors that, kind of pocket style that open sideways and eliminate that. And this is why I did comment the exterior path of travel meets the minimum 1500 without obstruction, and made sure that that caveat has been covered. And we'll see how they respond with typically they will most likely come back with a second draft to comment on these things. Especially as we're asking them to add spaces, they'll either accept or deny. And along with these doorways, I mean, we don't see distances here, so it's hard to say how wide. I can almost guess it's probably wall to curb is 1500 exact, at which point you're right, those doors would open into the path, and therefore, depending on the placement of the door openers, could impede them trying to get in.
Right.
Can we comment that the door should not impede on the button?
You don't want it to impede outward?
On the button.
So the door itself locks the
Oh, yeah, okay.
button.
Yep. So I added that, Max, to the notes as well to specify about the doors, and which followed, Peter, your comments as well.
Yeah. Is there any further questions or comments from the committee? All right. If there's no further comments, then we can vote on putting those comments forward. All in favor? And any opposed? All right, that carries as well. Means we can move on to 7.2, which is another property application, a memorandum from the accessibility advisor regarding the site plan application SPEX 2023-01, submission number 1, which is 1 Henderson Drive. And can I have a mover and a seconder to put this item forward for discussion? All right, Allison as a mover, seconded by John. Great. Yeah, Greg, take it away.
Alrighty, so this property is the Metro, and so they are proposing an exterior garden center in their own parking lot. So this is the overview. This is their parking lot in general. So down here you have the existing building, and then they are taking up these 16 spots to build the garden center. And then this is a rendering of the spaces. So it looks like there are 5 parking spaces that will be blocked off, for entranceway, so 5 spaces wide to enter. There's going to be a cashier checkout area here in the top corner. And then along this side here, we have flower rails in this pink color in a square fashion as the path of travel with these green shelving units down, around, and back out. And then in open area near the entrance. And then these lines would be the gate surrounding the, I guess, the area. So quite simple in setup. The only comments I had typically, knowing these garden centers, they in all outdoor areas tend to put stuff all over the place. So a specific comment about ensuring the 1.5 meters for path of travel with, again, no obstructions, ensuring that the aisles are not blocked with planters and other display items. So again, trying to be specific at this point, mainly focusing on these areas here to allow the path down and around. Again, we don't have measurements of this space. So this, at least if they're that consideration or sort of condition, we can let them know. And that's it.
Right. Any questions or comments from the committee?
There's a couple of things is, in terms of visibility, hazards on the ground, garden hoses, extension cords, ensure that they're visible. Either they have a ramp or they're yellow tape or whatever to designate that. But this is already up in operation, so it's kind of a new situation. But I guess for the visual thing, people with low visibility see those trip hazards. Maybe have that little ramp.
Thanks, John. I've added that, and it's good to know that it's already in operation. Sometimes what we see is
Yeah.
they start and then they may have to make changes afterwards. So
The layout was approved in 2019, so it's no layout, but I guess just repeat, submit every year.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Yeah, Allison.
If there's no changes to legislative like requirements, is there a reason they have to resubmit for the same thing every year?
So yes, just to make sure we are aware that they're going to do it. So that would be mainly the first thing. And if, previous years, something happened or it's, they didn't follow through with certain comments, we can always, comment on, hey, last year, this wasn't done, ensure it's done this year, kind of thing. So it does allow, and I've heard of other properties being approved previously and then just going ahead with it without us knowing. And then it's a matter of contacting them to just remind them, you do need to reapply. They're not temporary. It's not a permanent fix. It's an exemption and for this time.
Any further comments or questions on this memorandum? Right. And I suppose we can vote on putting this forward. All in favor of putting these comments forward? Any opposed? All right, that carries as well. We can move on to the third of these memorandums. This one regarding the site plan application for SP 2022-09, submission number 2 for 1588 St. John's Side Road, blocks 3 and 4. And for this one, is there a mover and a seconder to put this forward? All right, Joanne moves. And John, all right. Take it away, Greg.
Sorry, I jumped the gun on that one. To start with this, we have already seen this property. So I want to just preface, actually last week we talked about the blocks 1 and 2. And so today we're going to be talking about 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So it's all in the same general area, which we will further discuss. So just to preface, the last 2 plans we did comment on have already been submitted. I've let them know we will be updating should the committee have comments. These 2 plans have not yet been submitted. So whatever we decide to add today, sorry, these 2, this one and then the following one will be submitted after this meeting this week as they're due on Friday. So we will definitely get our comments for these 2 entered. So again, to preface, so we did look at block 1 way up here in the top corner. This was our the Dairy Queen and Starbucks that we had conversations about last week. Today we are going to be looking, or this plan is looking at 3 and 4, which is this industrial unit here. So this is the rendering for the unit. So there's going to be truck stops here. Again, it's 2 stories tall, looks very industrial in the top, very open, and then path right along the side with entrances to each unit along the front side. This one's quite small, so I'm going to zoom in. The first draft comments were already submitted. So come on November 1st. So these were submitted last year. And again, just based on the lack of information and, it was very high level on first draft. These were the comments that were previously submitted. So automatic door openers at all entrances. These are, standard comments. Exterior path of travel being the 1.5 meters. Curb ramps with accessible curb ramps at any path of travel where it crosses a curb. The tactile plates at any staircases. They did propose 5 barrier-free spots, and I did say that it was sufficient. However, I did recommend that we spread those spots along the unit so that we can capture both ends of the unit. I believe they had them right in the middle, and that was it. The main floor washroom to be barrier-free path of travel, barrier-free and universal. And then, of course, 2 considerations for the evacuation chairs at the staircases and customer service counters to have accessibility spots and induction loops should there be one. And so, again, it was more generic at this point for the first draft. And then at this point, they did respond to all of these comments. So I just want to kind of add this into this report that, again, at time of permit, we're going to see some of these things completed, that they did note that they were going to do this. So the door timers and delays at permit will be seen. So we unfortunately don't see the permits. So we're not going to necessarily see it, but they did note it that it will be added. The curb cuts, it's going to be on these plans, so we'll look at those. The distances being 1.5 meters, the dimensions are on the plans. The tactile indicators, they will be providing again at a later date. The parking, it looks like they've updated the site plan to accommodate. The washrooms, they only showed as rough-ins, so there may not even be washrooms in some of the units. I guess it depends on what the unit becomes. But they have been located in such a way that it could be served for barrier-free path of travel and can be accessible, which is good to know. The customer service counters, again, similar idea. The building's just a shell. The counters, once the tenants decide to come in there, if there is a need for a customer service counter, those would be on the separate permit applications. So as they decide to start building each individual unit, it will depend on who goes in there. And then again, the emergency evacuation chairs, they did provide space and power for future use should the need arise. So again, on my end, it's good that they're noting and addressing these items, but most of them we're not going to see until, well, we're not going to see at all. We're just going to, unfortunately, have to hope it'll get done. As we move on, so this is the property that we are looking at. The parking structure actually did change how it looks from the first design. So as you could see, there's a couple of spots here by unit 1 and 2. Then there's a big walkway here, and then there's a couple of spaces here by 8. I don't actually know if these are parking. It looks like there are. They are parking spaces, but they're just not labeled with the lines. We do have, again, a few more spaces here. There's a space, a few more spaces here. So after every path, there are these curb ramps that do lead into the units. It is a one-way curb. So it does, if we zoom in, there's a curb ramp on the one side and then a full curb on the other. So I guess the intent is you come up, use, and then come back the way you came to access the parking spaces. And then we continue on along the way. Down here, it appears that these two are the two barrier-free spots. They talk about parking signage with these little T's. They're not noted on this plan that these are the barrier-free spots. However, just based on sizing and the access aisle, we can tell that they are. And that's all I can see at this point. Moving on, we do start to see a little bit more detail. So that big gap of I didn't know what it was. We'll see that there are 2 here by units 1, 2, and 3. And then there are the 2 here. So again, they went from 5 down to 4 after the submission of this plan. So I just want to make note of that. And I saw that through the landscape plan. Again, they are, so this is the interior of the unit, very open. There are proposed staircases and washrooms. Once again, these are all rough-ins, and the final layout of these facilities or these buildings and what's going to be here will depend on what they decide to put in. Each of these areas, as you can start to see, are gaps in the walkways, and these end up being what appears to be loading areas or large entranceways of some sort to enter. And we can go back to the first plan and we'll be able to see that. Again, this is a proposed second floor should the need arise. It is just this little area. So a staircase in this little area up here. Should somebody be actually using an upstairs, it looks like it'll just be a storage area of some sort. Again, my guess. And then as we saw in the previous plan with the same applicant, all of the additional washrooms, facilities, and the barrier-free requirements would be on a separate application as they start to submit the permits and they start to finalize what is actually going into these spaces. At this point, I just captured 2 screens. So this shows a little more detail in what we just saw. So the barrier-free rough-ins for the main floor washroom, and then of course the staircases as well. These are basically a continuation. So up here, you are seeing units 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we continue down here, 6, 7, 8, 9, so on and so forth. It repeats all the way to the end. So to save space and time, I just captured these two, but imagine this times the rest of the strip. They all are the same units, as you can see. And that, I believe, is it. So these are just the, again, high level, second floor, what could go in these spaces. It is a very relatively small area, maybe an office, maybe storage, or maybe nothing at all. Okay. In terms of elevations, again, sometimes I like to put these in if they do have some form of slope. So we can definitely see, as we move towards the far end, they are taller in nature. As we move here, they are shorter and potentially only one floor, which explains why we only have, a very small space on the second floor, potentially. In saying that, I'm going to come back to here. So as we saw, let me try to zoom in so you can try and see. We do have the parking spaces and then the gaps in between. Doesn't appear to me like they are loading areas as we initially thought, but they very well could be pickup zones or pickup areas, large textile manufacturers or tiles, anything that you would need to load into a vehicle after purchasing, probably have those reserved spots there, but you can kind of see that layout in this little rendering. So comment wise, again, I commented originally there was 5 proposed barrier-free spaces. They did separate them, but that 5th spot is not appearing on the map. So I did recommend to add it back and add it in the middle, as we had 2 on one end, 2 on the other, to have the 5th spot somewhere in the middle. And only I did comment that the landscape plan showed the spaces, but the site plan only showed the signage and not the actual location, just for clarity. And then I also added 2 comments for consideration that I was unsure of the proposed use of the mezzanines, as there's currently no accessible way to access that mezzanine level. And we did see that in some of our other plans last month. And then secondly, I've acknowledged that the final accessible features will be part of the fit up drawings, at that point, our hope is that they would go ahead and follow through with those accessible options. And that's it.
I have few comments on candidate for a club cut on both sides of it. Sidewalk.
I'm in agreement with Max. I was gonna comment on that, but you beat me to it. So if you're going from the accessible spots, one end, so you go down to, you can zoom in, right?
Mhm.
So in the middle there,
These
I
ones.
guess if you're going from the accessible spots to say unit 8. And then you have to go over to unit 10, you have a curb cut, you have to go back out into traffic and around 2 parking spots. And back over to the curb cut in front of unit 9 to unit 10. So we were putting people at risk. cutting through traffic, because that's actually a wooden door. Say somebody in a wheelchair or walker may not move that quickly. They're walking into a possible cube van or a truck, backing into that space between units 7 and 8. See where I'm getting at? It's when you
Yep.
go and say, or
Right.
unit 8. They want to get to unit 9 or 10, they have to walk back out.
I think the next plan might show that better. And thanks for commenting on that. As I was talking about these ramps, I also noticed that as well. So yeah, so we're talking, we come up here. You know, I did recommend an additional barrier-free spot right over here. And at which point we have a curb here. Same with this, same with here, and so on and so forth. So having one flow of path of travel right along the side. Again, it says loading access.
Mm.
So, John, to your point, if we do have that, you know, curb cut, it would basically we're crossing a sidewalk, you know, across the street every single time we're accessing these little islands. So, but to me, that's no different than coming up this way, right? So if we're coming up into this ramp, this is still a loading access, right? So I think the recommendation to put these ramps right across, or quite frankly, build a sidewalk that just goes right across. There's no reason why loading access can't start here. And then there's a curb here to stop them from impeding on that path of travel. I mean, that's another option that we could definitely recommend. Again, I don't know the purpose of this facility to know if that's feasible, but we absolutely can recommend it.
I have some concerns too, because I remember once before last year or so, we ran into a thing where wasn't until we really looked at the pictures. And when I was looking at the actual photo model thing that they did, it looked like the cars were driving by and everything, and there was the sidewalk up at the door. So there was no accessibility up at the door for people to go in. They were having to cross over wherever cars, and I know that happens in other places, but we can modernize this, I think, a little bit. And I remember the other company that we had, we found out the trucks were coming through. And I think it's just a little bit too much to set that up that way. It just, to me, just seems to be silly. I don't know. It's really taking a chance, I think.
So to that comment, Joanne, right here, so we see the access aisle in between the two spots. And this is something which we're going to cover a little bit later with our Access Now assessment that we had done this past week and last. But these areas, just these indicators, it's just paint on the floor to denote. So again, if we're going to put access aisles here, even those, you know, yellow hash marks, lines on the floor to really denote like this is, again, John, to your point of a high contrast on the floors, right? Something here to denote that there's a continuation of a path, whether it's a sidewalk, curb ramps, paint on the floor. Again, for safety reasons, I think that would be required. And I didn't make comments to that. But I'm going to start to be looking at these kind of paths a lot more and hopefully start seeing them more.
Well, also the building's looking at a lot of stairways for people to go up and down. There's no elevator throughout that whole building because they're sectioned off, and is there no way that at least at one end or the other, somebody can get up to wherever they're going? Or
They're all separate units.
I know that
It's
it's just difficult. It's just, to me, difficult.
Yep. So
Anyway.
So again, Joanne, to that, so I did comments that I was unsure of the use of those second levels,
Yeah.
right? Again, similar to our last unit where we had the 2 stories on the top and the bottom and the 3 stories and the only
Yeah.
elevator. It appears that that's 3rd story was going to be office. We can only speculate without the answers. Here, it very well could just be, storage or maybe nothing at all. And so, all of this stuff in these plans are roughed in. The final person may decide, you know what, we don't want anything up there, and it stays empty.
Yeah.
So, hard to say at this point. We probably are going to see a 3rd and or 4th. I believe the last block 1, we ended up seeing 5 drafts before we just submitted our 4th or 5th draft. So I think we'll see this a few more times this year, and hopefully get a little more clarity as to what's going in here.
I was a little concerned, the people, I know they don't want to, the elevators are really big and huge. But I work with the Voices of Joy, and they're intellectually challenged and physically challenged adults. And they've opened up a place where we rehearse in a church, and they have a full elevator in this building. But now, because it's not so convenient for some of the people in our choir in particular, they went ahead and put a smaller scaled elevator in, and it's just exceptional to go from just the one floor to the next one. And it's unbelievable to me. And I just feel that there's some issues that could be covered and aren't being, but anyway, you know more about it than I do.
So, Joanne, to your comment, I added to my consideration of me not being sure of what the use of that second level is going to be used for. I just asked the question, can access be provided should the need arise on that second level? So is this something that is going to be pre-built? Is this something that can be built when the tenants start to come in, and then that decision gets made? I think at this point, it's hard for us, without knowing A, who's going to be in there, B, what the use of that second area is. It's not really a full floor, and may not be accessed to the public. So we'll ask the question, and hopefully on submission 3, we get a little more clarity.
Thanks.
Allison, you had your hand up, and I think Max after that, you had a question.
I think just to reiterate, we shouldn't, even if they know what the interim or immediate needs are, there's no telling what the long-term needs are or might change. So the argument could be made to always create some access, right? And not make an assumption, regardless of the intended use, that someone may or may not require access. And that the building could be sold and somebody else, to retrofit later is far more costly than to just do it now. From a cost perspective. Anyway, I digress. You sort of suggested that anyway.
Max, you had your.
Can you suggest that the bottom of the stairway be safe off?
I didn't catch the last part. The bottom of the stairways to be
Be safe of the people who have the
sorry.
What's the section off?
So section it off if it's not used.
the part of the floor below the stairs.
Oh, yes, yes, I understand. So blocking off under the stairs. So whether it's a storage area or blocking it off to not hit their head, could be a staircase, covered staircase. And if it's an open staircase, to basically barrier off for safety. Am I getting that, Max?
Yeah,
I'll add that in consideration. Because again, it'll depend how they build them, what they'll look like, and if they'll build them. Again, I'm not sure if these are Roffin plans or if there's going to be a stairs, right? So we'll add that to considerations.
I had a question about, it's again about the curb cuts outside, and it had to do with the elevation.
Mhm.
So that elevation you showed, that's sloping down towards the west, towards Leslie?
I believe so. Let me just get there. I think it's the last one, right?
Yeah, I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
it looks like this is, I'm assuming one being unit one,
Okay.
as we slope downwards to the rest. So yes, I would think it's sloped down that way. So somewhere around 5, 6 is when the slope will start.
I'm wondering if the reason they don't have curb cuts on both sides is because it's like almost an elevated sort of little platform to get up to the door? Or is the main door, does it follow the elevation, or is it like that sort of block that there's those holes along, or whatever, are those the doors, those labeled sort of rectangles in the middle
No,
there?
So these are the windows.
Those are
above.
windows, okay.
Yeah. So I don't actually have, it looks like this is also the back of the building.
I
So just
see,
showing
okay.
that elevation change,
Right.
this being the ground level, and then we kind of have to continue it like this, right? So it's
Right.
all flat, and then finally, when we get to 10, we start to
Right.
go up. So
I
it's
see.
8 to 10 that slope occurs. After 10, it's flat, and before 10, slight slope here from 7 to 8, but for the most part, before 8, it's again relatively flat.
So the
So-
front of the building looks like it's more or less level across the board.
oh,
The drawing that you're on, this is north elevation.
Yes,
North elevation, okay, so it is the back.
yeah. So this, yeah, it does. So based on this rendering, it looks flat right across,
Level.
which unless the front is level and the back slopes, right? So maybe the elevation change that we're seeing is on the back side, and the front side is actually level, because I don't have an elevation drawing for the front.
I was just wondering if that was why they had not included those cuts, because maybe they were like elevated access to the front if it's sloped down, but it doesn't look like it.
No. I think they're loading areas, so they're trying to allow cars to pull up right back near the door to load. Again, this rendering doesn't do it justice because those loading areas are not visible.
Right.
The slope's not here. I mean, technically, these are the barrier-free spots where we're looking right here, based on how they did their drawings. So it's very deceiving to look at this rendering to compare it to the plans. But we can absolutely, I mean, like I said, I've already commented on the path of travel for safe for pedestrian traffic, and then we'll see what they say.
Maybe as a broader question, that's not specifically a comment on this. Are there sort of best practices or regulations around dealing with elevation when it comes to accessibility? Is there a maximum grade or?
Yep. So slope is at minimum 1 to 15 or 1 to 20 is kind of the so it's 5 to 6.5% would be really the maximum slope that should be provided. Less is better,
Right.
but there is a top range of no more than 6.5%. for pedestrian traffic.
Thanks.
6.5 or 6.25, whatever the math is.
Okay. Were there any more questions or comments from the committee? Right, then I suppose we can vote on putting this memorandum forward. All in favor? And any opposed? All right, that carries as well. We move on to the other blocks on this site. So this is 7.4 regarding the site plan application SP 2020-08 submission number 3, 1588 St. John's Side Road, blocks 5 and 6. And if there's a mover and a seconder for this item, Max to move and Allison to second. All right, Greg,
Okay.
throw it to you.
Alrighty, so again, so this is now, we're talking about 5 and 6 of the same property, so this is directly across the street. Here, so again, we have a rendering drawing, similar look to the last building. This one does look more commercial. It looks like there's some restaurant levels here on the corner and more walking traffic, if you will. Again, we are dealing with 5 and 6, so we were just talking about up here in 3 and 4 across the street now is where 5 and 6 sits. So down here in the bottom right hand corner of the plan. Again, these so previously commented on for 5 and 6, and again, similar comments, very minimum drawings, didn't really have much detail. So again, provided general comments back in November. So door openers on all the doors, 1,500, so 1.5 meters without obstruction, tactile indicators at the staircases, washroom on the main level, again, universal, barrier-free path of travel, customer service counters, and evacuation chairs at all the staircases. So again, they've acknowledged most of the comments here. The tactile strips are noted at the time of permit. So again, when they start to permit, it looks like there will be staircases in this case, that they'll put them in there. Sidewalks have noted the size or the distances. And then, of course, the automatic door openers, again, at the time of permit, will be on the electrical drawings on the door schedules. So those are comments that have been commented back to us. Property wise, what we have here is, again, so it looks to be loading now towards the back. So what we do see is some side parking here on the one side, and then parking right across the front of the facility here. Yeah, and that's it. So garbage, and then so all the loading now appears in the back of the facility. So we do have this continuous path right across. The path is 2 meters. That does go from curb to doorway. As we go further, again, we do see that there are 2 barrier-free spots on the one side, and then the other 2 on the other side. So there are the 4 spaces based on the total lot, which again is sufficient number of spaces based on the number of parking they are providing. These are, again, the floor plans for the units. It looks to me that, let me zoom in a little. Every unit is virtually the same in look. We have a loading area in the back. We have that universal barrier-free, again, rough-ins on the main level, and then a staircase as you walk in per unit. Sorry, it's a little slow today. These are the second floor areas. So again, there is a staircase up and a small level here. So this big X is all open to the ground level. So again, office spaces, storage spaces, whatever the case is, it would really depend on who accesses or uses these areas. This is the roof plan. We don't really need to see that. Sorry about that. And then again, the detail here. So we do get a little cleaner detail as to what these properties are looking like. Again, we do have the rough-ins for the spaces, and then of course the staircases, and then the mezzanine, which is above the head above these staircases. And then this is the, again, second level, a little more detail. We can kind of see, oh, sorry, this is the other half of the unit. So we just saw units 1 through whatever, and this is the second half. All virtually the same. This is the second unit. So there is a slab, so a guard railing here. There is roof access for one of the units. And then again, the staircases with a mezzanine area, about 1,000 square feet per unit here. And that's the same as we continue on the rest of the building. This would be the front. So we do have doorways into the units and then large garage doors. This is, again, the south side of the facility, which would be the loading areas of our facility. So we have our loading doors and then the door. There is no staircases back here. It is a level property. So again, I, similar to the last plan, commented on the mezzanine, again, unsure of the uses. There's no accessible area. So we'll see their comments there. And then the other comments I did list is that's barrier-free spots. So I did recommend that we have 2 additional barrier-free spots around here at unit 11. So if we can put 2 additional spaces here, as we have 2 way down here, 2 way down here, and if we can get 2 more central, and that way we can cover the spread of this facility. And that's it.
Right. So to the committee for any questions or comments.
Again, I would like to comment that the portion of the therapy centered on
Already done, Max. And I've also added, Joanne, the additional comments and Allison about ensuring, seeing how we can make that second level accessible, similar to our first conversation.
Since got her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Allison.
That's okay. This can be across all buildings everywhere all the time. Do you know if there's a rule or why bathroom doors open in instead of out? Because like from my experience, and I'm very tiny, opening out is always more accessible, especially when you might have somebody with a caregiver. There's multiple people in there. Like I know we often see a map and they use, you know, a certain wheelchair radius turning point as the measurement, but that allows for one person only and just makes a lot of assumptions, right, about who's going in and why. Can we always offer up the recommendation to open the door outwards and then whatever way it's opening, put the button on the opposite side? Just as a standing suggestion all the time, everywhere.
The only problem I see in that, I can see what you're saying. The only problem I would see in that is that somebody that's already in the washroom, if they come out and open the door, they could crash into somebody that's walking along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that would be.
Might
what
be a
my-
reason why
my
it always,
concern might be.
Stores.
Making glass doors, yeah, for the washroom.
For washing.
no thanks.
That's a different kind of unit, Joanne. So I did comment on the consideration, if possible, to open outwards. So to Joanne's point, if it impedes path of travel, then it may not be possible. It could be space allotment, it could be design. Most of them do open inwards, but based on some of the observations that we did have, Allison, I do agree with the comments as well. Opening inward also prevents space, and then trying to get out and squeeze yourself while the door is opening inwards is also a challenge. So especially with the automatic doors.
It
so
looks like they're on walls, right? The plumbing,
they're so it's just roughed in.
rather than the door opening that way, they could open towards the wall
towards-
maybe,
Uh,
if they open
hard
out.
to say, because again, without more detail, this could also be open space. So
Right,
if we open it
okay.
one way or the other, either way, it's all open.
Got it.
So short of putting the door like by the stairs here, right? And then the door would open inwards, something like, let's see if this works. Something like that,
Right.
right? And moving the door completely and then just closing this wall off. Then it might be able to open. But, to Max's point, there probably would be a wall here to block the stairs. So it could very well open into the wall. But again, it's a recommendation. We can put a consideration if possible, and we'll see what they say.
Maybe as it's not really a compromise, but something we could add to that idea of it being kind of a standing recommendation would be. So there's a minimum turning radius allowed inside a accessible washroom. And we just recommend always that radius does not include the travel path of the door, so that it's slightly larger to accommodate for the door, in the case where you can't have the door open outwards.
You must be reading my screen, Peter. I was just writing that as you were chatting. So, and I believe last month we commented as well. I believe Max commented to make these washrooms a little bigger. So I also added that. Can we make these spaces bigger? Again, if they're roughed in, they can be as big or as small as they'd like. I'm just not sure based on these dotted lines, if that means this is here or not. But we can definitely put the comments in there.
It looks like the door path is not, well, it's close to that radius.
Yeah.
It just accounts for like single use, right? It just doesn't account for the fact that there could be two wheelchairs in there for whatever reason, or
Yeah. There is an overlap on the door
Tiny
swing.
bit.
yeah.
here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
Yeah, so I did comment on that as well.
So that kind of suggests that it's not a regulation that radius excludes the door, right? If they're allowing them to overlap there. So maybe that should just be a recommendation always.
Mhm.
Hmm. Any more comments or questions on this memo? All right, well.
So I did take those comments. And again, I think we're gonna get a comment back during the final fit up. The details will be provided. So again, at least it's in writing and at least we've commented on it, and we'll see what they say on draft 4 in this case.
Okay, well, if there are no further comments, then we can vote on this item as well. All in favor of putting those comments forward? And anyone opposed? All right, that carries as well. Which brings us on to our last piece of business for the night, which is the roundtable discussion regarding the Town of Aurora multi-year accessibility plan 2022 to 2026. And for this last piece, a mover and a seconder here as well. So John will move it and Allison seconds. Okay,
Great.
so this is a roundtable, I suppose, but Greg, maybe you can kick us off.
Sure. So I commented a couple of times in this meeting, so I'm just going to update. So we did actually complete, it took us close to 17 hours, but we did complete our audit. I call it an audit, our review of 8 of our facilities with Access Now. The mappers were amazing. The team was great. I have nothing but good things to say about the experience. We did, I was able to bring on a handful of staff for the respective buildings to join us in the process. And I know that they all learned a lot. It was tough, as we also had some other conflicting trainings throughout the month, and so there was limited availability for staff, but we did get it done. They did take it back. I've been in communication with Access Now to pretty much all week, this week and last, and we are slated to launch and media release ready to go for Monday, May 29th, as the start of National Accessibility Week. So just an update there. And they did a very thorough job. We went through virtually every area of each of the facilities. So we did do the Stronach Aurora Recreation Complex, Aurora Family Leisure Complex, and the Aurora Community Center, our 3 complexes. We also went through Town Hall and the Joint Operations Center. Although they have limited public access, they were also thorough in those areas as well. We did do the Petch House, as we did have special events in that facility and did install ramps. It's just basically an open room with a ramp inside and out. And, oh, sorry, the senior center as well. It was in the same parking lot. And then we also did let me see if I get this correctly, the Lind Realty Inc. Sports Dome, which is now what we call it, in the same parking lot as the Aurora Family Leisure Complex. So we did go through that facility as well, and really tested those airlock doors with the mappers. So that was interesting. We are intended to get a report back. So once we do get that full report back, I will absolutely share it with the committee. Not sure if it will be June or July where we get a full report back, but we will be verified, and come 2 weeks from now, you will be, or 2.5 weeks, you will be able to see us verified on the Access Now platform, which we do encourage everyone to use. Share it with your friends and family. Let everyone know about the platform, download it through the app or access it online. And by all means, start commenting on experiences and encourage them to do the same in our community. So that is an update there. In terms of events for the week, we are looking to get some social media messaging out. On the Wednesday, we did get confirmation of our speaker, Anthony, to be coming in to talk to staff and council. We'll all be invited remotely and in person in council chambers. We will be recording it and definitely can share it with the committee as well. And then other social media posts throughout the week. So for accessibility that we are working on crafting and also getting out. So those are the two updates I have in terms of what's on the current go. In terms of accessibility plan updates from last month to this month, not much has changed in terms of update. But, needless to say, we do have some stuff on the go for starting the summer into the rest of this year, which we can definitely chat about later this year. And that's all I have at this point.
Maybe we can open it up to the committee to questions or comments about the plan. Yeah, John.
So a couple of buildings that, I guess we're included in that. One would be the armory. It's a town building. That should be part of that audit. And the sticking point, the one that nobody wants to touch, is Victoria Hall.
So,
Accessibility.
so we talked about it last week, John. So we're only doing the 8 facilities this year. I'm going to be putting a capital project together to do the rest of our facilities, which will include Victoria Hall did get an assessment done. We know it's not accessible at all. And there is plans to update that facility to be accessible. We are also going to be adding Town Square as it's currently under renovation. So Cultural Center, Library, Town Square will all also be done next year, along with the Armory, or Theater Aurora, or the Aurora Theater, and Mahoney House, which is the building by the lawn bowling courts and the tennis courts out there. So all of those facilities it's slated to be done next year, and all our parks and trails will also be done next year.
And can we also get a little more information on Library Square? Because we only saw a draft piece of it, very broad plan years ago. And we haven't really seen it. I know the project is probably the biggest capital project in Aurora ever.
Mhm.
We haven't really seen any detailed plans. Is it possible to see some of that?
I can definitely look to the project manager is off this week, so we could try to get something for June. It would just be, I guess, the final draft of the site plan we can definitely look through. I did have an opportunity to walk through the facility in September. It was all steel beams and big holes, and there wasn't much to see, but I did comment on a few things in my walkthrough that they didn't really have the answers for, as it was still not in any final stages. We are closer to being finished at this point. So we are, from my understanding, I believe, and I can't say for sure, but sometime this year we are planning to open, if not early next year. I think a year from now we will have full occupancy and be in that facility. Of course, it's construction, so give or take. I am working with the team at this point for assistive listening devices throughout the facility to outfit the general areas, the bar, the box office, and some of the other common areas, as well as all the other rooms. And just actually, we're working with the Canadian Hearing Services as well to get a good idea of what we are proposing to put in there, what's going to work, if they have better recommendations moving forward, and that sort of thing. But I can definitely look to at least get a plan to view, John, for
Okay.
our next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Allison, you had your hand up.
I guess I'm curious when and how we help inform the experience of a space versus just looking at a blueprint and did they follow code? So I remember asking for a meeting with the mayor a couple of years ago to look at Town Square specifically, because I heard rumblings of concerns for accessibility. And it just seems like there's such a missed opportunity to ask folks about what it's actually going to be like to use the space beyond, is there a accessible door or parking or a bathroom, especially with respect to the new theater. I know there's a plan, but the plan is just to code and doesn't speak to what it's like to go to an event, to have options at an event, especially because for example, my experience is if the access is in the front row, then I'm paying front row pricing, and now I don't have the option. And there's an access need there with affordability and experience too beyond, can I navigate the space? So I guess my broad question is, as a committee, how do we have those discussions and influence folks in planning these projects before we get to this point where we're way too far to change anything, right? Like we're past the point of the building, but to me, it's such an oversight and missed opportunity. And like, when do we get off this cycle of the same thing happening and actually get folks to understand how we use and live and work and play in the space? And to your comment about public access in town buildings, that implies that an employee might not need accessibility, which again is another systemic issue with our town and having such a narrow view of who needs what and when and why and how. That's a lot of commentary, but I think I'm, in my limited experience on the committee, already experiencing a frustration with how we actually help people understand broadly what all of our needs are and care about them.
John, you wanted to comment? Yeah.
The original intent of the Accessibility Advisory Committees, when I think it was the Harris government came through it with it, was to make municipalities, facilities, services accessible to all. Whether it's your facilities, your billing, your communication process, all those things. Each and every one of us have that same path to go forward, whether you want to get to a building or you want a particular service, or you want to talk to somebody, communicate with them. So that was always the main intent of the committees. The site plans that we see, that's all gravy. We have that opportunity to comment on those public spaces outside the municipality, outside the municipality's government, and be able to talk about that. But our main focus should be in Library Square, exactly what you said. We should have that input prior and be able to see the plans, not to see them after the building.
Well, and arguably help inform and be at the table in the creation of it, right? Like to advise after, suggest we don't have something to provide into building it, right? Into.
So I can comment on as much as I can. I did take notes, Allison, as you were talking. So I hope I can, cover some of the feedback or questions, I should say. So in terms of planning process, I can't speak to what happened before me. Of course, Town Square has been on the docket for quite a few years now. And I can't speak to kind of that process beforehand. But when I did walk through myself, there were some pretty glaring questions that I had that was hard to answer at the time because the answers just weren't there. The without seeing where things were going to be placed, we have to hope and trust that it's going to be done right. And if it's not, you know what, then we look to go ahead and fix it. It is what it is. It's unfortunate, but moving forward, and I've had conversations with staff that involvement in any town projects, and John just kind of alludes to your comments as well, needs to be brought forward to us before we start. The input of the Accessibility Advisory Committee needs to happen, especially for town programs, services, needs assessments, whatever the case is. And we need to be able to provide input, like you said, Allison, earlier in the process, not after the fact, because you're right. After the fact is more costly than dealing with it at the beginning. But John, like you said, we only see site plans. So some of those final fit ups and drawings, we don't necessarily see. It's up to me to, I guess, figure out what is being built, how it's being done internally, and then making sure that we can hopefully catch it before it starts so that we can provide our commentary before they go to tender and provide all the work and that sort of thing. So it is something that is on the top of my mind. I can tell you that. And it is something that we've already had conversations with other staff. One of the challenges that we have is construction projects and, well, projects in general can be done by any one of the 260 plus staff that work for the town. So to try to get, and I'm only one person, right? So to try to get me into absolutely everything to figure out if there's a need is also tough. So we do have work to do. There is, training and involvement. I will be speaking to management and leadership in the upcoming, I want to say, couple of months to talk about accessibility. We will be breaking down the Access Now report. And Allison, a lot of your comments will actually come to light, I feel, in that report, and will be an eye-opening observation for staff that didn't get to participate. And the questions will be raised. How did we get to this point? Surprisingly, I think some of our best laid out and accessible facilities are the oldest ones. And I was actually shocked by that. The arenas, so the ACC that was built in the early 1940s or 50s or 60s, I can't remember, has a lot of great accessible features compared to the Stronach complex, which was relatively new. Beyond that, Accessible Canada is coming in. They are providing recommendations to the federal government to not have a minimum, like to really raise the bar. And that bar is going to be raised so high that all the provinces will then need to come up to that bar. The AODA has also looked at the design of public spaces and provided recommendations for that. And I can absolutely circulate, I believe I have a feedback form that they would love to provide. And I did ask for something so I can provide it to committees. Maybe I'll look to get that on the agenda for June to share it with the committee here, where we can provide updates to what we feel should be required as an update to AODA. And a lot of the requirements for the design of public spaces have a higher bar and a higher minimum standard in the building code. So there's a lot more alignment with AODA and building code. The bar is raised, the minimum standard is raised, definitions are clearer, and a lot more putting AODA first and not a bare minimum building code. So from my understanding, these of course are recommendations that need to be taken up by government, but there is a lot of stuff happening on the federal side, on the provincial side, and then internally on the municipal side to try and push the conversation of accessibility in what we do.
Joanne, you had something to add as well.
I have a couple of questions regarding, I know it's a hard thing because places have been built already.
Mhm.
But we do have situations where the guy that's doing the snow plowing for a plaza puts all the snow into the accessibility spot and leaves it there. And it's happened in more places than I can shake a stick at, I'll tell you. And there's like, I've asked the fellows that owned the place, I'm not saying who I was or what committee I was ever on or anything. I just said, how come that's taken up? Because they could see me with a cane. And I just didn't say it was for me or anything, you know, but I just said, how come? And he said, well, they just hired the guy to do it. Well, do we not make sure that businesses have requirements either? You know, to meet for the town. I mean, they don't just go out and throw their garbage on the front step and that type of thing. Should we not have some things like this? Some doors on the old buildings, for instance, are so hard that almost two people need to push them open. And they're not powered in any way. I know that I went to get paint one day and I had 2 gallons and I said to the fellow, would you mind taking them out? Because I've got the cane in one hand. And he said, oh, that's no problem at all. He took it out. He tried to open the door with 2 gallons of paint, and he was a big, tall guy. And he tried to open the door and let me through at the same time. And I said, oh, this looks like you may need an automatic door opener. And he said, you're right. But the thing is, it's just little things. I know they're in older buildings and things like that. But if there's things being corrected or a building's being changed in any way, I think those things have to be looked at.
So to that point, so I was at an Ontario Network of Accessibility Professionals conference meeting combo a couple weeks ago, end of April in Waterloo. And we actually had Accessible Canada there. We actually were able to speak directly to the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility as well. And I actually commented, a lot of us actually commented to that comment directly, Joanne. Right now, municipalities have no ability to enforce on private property. And it's up to the province to enforce the accessibility standards. And they're a team of 50 dealing with tens of thousands of organizations in Ontario. So what they are doing is they're looking to try to get their message out to these smaller organizations and businesses. But at this point, you know, it's unfortunate, but as a municipality, and John kind of alluded to it, our main focus and our main ability to make change is internally with our own program services and facilities. Beyond that, we can make recommendations externally to the built buildings or the largely renovated buildings, which we've also asked for clarity on what that exactly means. But beyond that, if you're just changing a room here or there, there's not really a requirement according to the accessibility AODA standards that the change happen. We can absolutely request it and recommend it, but if it's small, there's no need right now to change. And that is part of the requirements of the province. The hope is in the next 17 plus years, when Accessible Canada comes through with the Accessible Canada Act, that level does increase. That does ensure that all businesses need to be accessible. And I believe that is their goal, regardless of age, facility, or what is being done. Accessibility will be required in the next 17 to 20 years. So that will be a federal mandate across Canada. We will see what that looks like in 15 years.
I know it's a difficulty, but the one thing that I'm thinking of too is that we do things to raise funds for different organizations, whether it's for Aboriginals or whether it's for the gay community or whatever. Can the accessibility people for the province or whatever, or even our town, not pull together an accessibility fundraiser or whatever it is to try to support some of these people that maybe have issues with maybe updating their door or whatever they do, but that we could do something along that line that would be really out there to be helpful to the people in the community that have the, accessibility issues.
To your point, as a to this part of my dreams go to and accessibility fund. So for example, the door to my studio was accessible, but they were able to make a two automatic door with that funding. So maybe we can do something. I can put you in contact. Greg will bring people going.
So, Joanne and Max, we can absolutely look if that's something that we want to do and look to do. I'm looking at other options as well to also support our business community, where we as a municipality, I mean, the federal government gives and provincial government gives quite a bit of money as well. And a lot of them are for small businesses for specific needs and purposes. There was a lot of money given by provinces for retrofitting and renovations and stuff like that as well. So help is there with Accessible Canada. They're starting to have additional grants starting to come out, and I guess the hope is in a few years federal governments would also be providing quite a bit of money. But I think
I just thought maybe it would be an opportunity for us to make our community be like we're trying to lead something and not, and I know that we have some backing in the backgrounds there, but I just thought it would be a nice thing to do, something different.
and go ahead, Max.
I know that the grants are available, but not everybody knows about them, and we have time to apply to them because I know that will make you jump through many hoops.
So yes, but also the application processes are becoming easier. So we just applied for one ourselves for an outdoor garden at the senior center. So were specific requirements. Yes, we did have to put some work together and have a meeting, but the processes become more checklist based. So they are trying to make it easier. There are some cases, like you said, Max, You will have to jump through some hoops in our case, municipalities don't get a lot of grant money, being that we are municipalities so it's actually tough for us, but we do apply wherever we can, as best as we can. If we wanted to do fundraising to help others, that's an option. If those business, we want to encourage those businesses to fundraise for their own needs. I think we could definitely help to share their messages as well. Allison, earlier made a comment, right? But I think it's a large part, and Max, you kind of also just mentioned it. It's the education, right? It's the letting them know what's there, what can be done, little things like accessibility doesn't always cost money. Building an elevator costs money. Putting in a ramp when you have 5 stairs, yes, costs money. There's large renovations. But changing your print on your papers and changing your menu styles and changing some of that content internally doesn't cost that much money. You're changing your menu, just make your font a little bit bigger. Change the font sans serifs, whatever the case is. So there are little things that I think we can educate our community on. Allison, I know you have your hand up, but just to kind of wrap that up, it's not off the table. It's an option, absolutely. But I could tell you, I am looking at other ways that we can possibly help our business community out in monetary ways that we can hopefully help them to become more accessible.
Yes, Allison, you've been waiting.
I'll try to be brief. We could talk about this for hours and hours. On this comment, I like what you said, Greg, about educating, and perhaps it's like presenting to the Chamber of Commerce or these small businesses. My experience is many small business, anyone can open a small business. I think they know of the AODA. There's so many flaws in that you train yourself as an organization, you report back on yourself. There's no reporting as a customer that I can do to file a formal complaint. Like there's very little oversight. So can we maybe help them do their homework and create some kind of toolkit, if you will, for local businesses to remind them of their obligations, beyond, fine, there's no ramp and stairs, but then what are you doing to accommodate in the absence of that? And we do have some businesses taking initiative and doing that. So let's thank them for that and acknowledge it and support that business, and then make those suggestions to others, and help them help themselves and help us. But I see a need on this committee to go beyond the town's programs and buildings. We know that you're going to follow the bare minimum. Like you have to as a municipality, but it's when you're in a community, it's all those small businesses and every other interaction I find that is more challenging than whether or not I am going to be accommodated at the local swimming pool. I will be accommodated. I know that. But my second comment is from a town perspective, when we have big projects, and we saw with the parks plan that we're hiring outside consultants and we're paying people big money to inform our plans, what is the obligation of the town to hire somebody who is educated beyond our positions as volunteers on a committee and beyond your position for the town, to hire a consultant who is trained in inclusive design and who has lived experience? Both would be my my sort of request. And I face this at my own organization where we don't have clear policy on that. And our whole organization is for kids with disabilities. So it's not necessarily an issue that is isolated to here, but I wonder what we can do to make that a requirement, that when you're hiring consultants, that they have experience in inclusive design.
I'm going to comment on your second point, and then I'm going to pass it off to Haley because I think I know what she's going to say. But in terms of obligation, there, I think it's more of understanding what the purpose of the project is, and how does accessibility fit into that project, and making sure it's included. That I think is probably, again, the bare minimum. But I can tell you that next month we will be diving into, last week we mentioned the feasibility study for recreational programs. I did have initial conversations, and Allison, to that exact point, we will be coming to the committee before we even start anything. So we will be getting your feedback, your wants, your needs, your thoughts before we even put pen to paper. Technically, we put pen to paper because we had to do something for the committee. But I am involved right from the start, and that's, I hear you. Anything moving forward at this point, if I catch wind that we are doing something, I will probably stick my nose in and see what it's all about, and probably try to take it to this committee as sooner rather than later. So that is my commitment to you. If I hear it, I will stick my nose inside and try to bring it to this committee before we get to it's too late. So I will definitely try my best, Allison. And then Haley.
Yeah, Haley.
So I was gonna wait till the next section, but since we're kind of talking about it anyways, so for those who were on the committee last time, you'll have heard me talk about this, but I am reigniting my video project. So I've talked to Greg about it. So for those who are new, the video on the town website came from this originally, that was created by the last committee. But I had a project idea because I wanted to see a more accessible town. I based it off of a documentary that I saw a couple of years ago about a small community in New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, somewhere out there, that made their town completely accessible. All the businesses learned how to communicate with people with disabilities, and a hotel set up a sensory room for kids to use, and like they were all just involved, and it was spectacular. So I was hoping with that video project, it was kind of a couple things going. One, just more information on kind of what accessibility is, what does it look like, what does it mean. I also come from that, we talk a lot about, kids with autism or people with motor issues or visual issues, but we also don't talk about the mental health side that the AODA does actually cover. So that's an important thing. But also other things as well. So this video project, I thought of creating different challenges with the notion that this is one person's experience and not everyone's experience, and everything is a spectrum, but to start to challenge people within our community, council, town staff, to different challenges to help them understand what different disabilities might feel like for an individual. And also to create videos for businesses. So I was going around to different businesses beforehand, and whichever ones would allow me to come in and provide feedback for them on what they could do. So for example, as I went to the Harveys in Aurora, and they had one of their advertising signs right in front of the accessibility button. I was like, maybe you should move that would help with accessibility. But making that, and Greg and I discussed making that kind of more into video sections for different types of businesses as well. So like, here's a video for restaurants on what you can do to make it yourselves more accessible. Here's a video for, grocery stores, for, therapy offices and things like that. So I'm hoping we might be able to bring this to the table at a future meeting. If it happens in June, I'm not here, I can't attend. But I'm hoping one we could bring up and hopefully get everyone involved in making some ideas for what challenges might be helpful for council or people in our community to go through to help understand, as well as kind of other videos that we can make. And this will be a long-term project. We were thinking like 1 or 2 a year just for feasibility for staff and everyone right now. And if that could change to more later on, great. But just starting that process to help with information. That's my spiel. I think I got it all.
I think you did. It was a good segue.
And the only comment I had was, in the past, we tried to build a relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, provide a fact sheet. And right now, 15% of the population has some sort of disability, and that's gonna grow, obviously, with the olding, or aging, population. And, just a fact sheet, and maybe the town can provide, the links to Trillium Foundation to get the grants and so on, federal money that's available, to smaller businesses. I know we can't provide them with that, but that money, but maybe they go through those proper channels. That's done that way.
John, I missed the second half, and when you turned, lost sound, but I think I got it. What we can do, and you mentioned, Trillium Foundation, and Joanne, you mentioned what's out there, Max, and Allison, you also mentioned education. What we can absolutely do is look to say, what resources are we all aware of? And we can definitely look to, link, have a did you know section. You can get money these places, and then we can also just direct them to those organizations themselves. And so if organizations, businesses are coming to our accessibility page on the town's website because they want to learn more about accessibility in Aurora, there'll be a section there that we can redirect to say, all these people are giving out money. Why don't you go apply? And maybe, Haley, to the point of video projects, and Max, to your comment about the challenges and the barriers and the hoops that they have to be jumped through, maybe a video section is how to fill out a grant form, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be accessibility focused, but to help you get some federal money or provincial money, you're going to have to write a grant. And I did actually have two that stood out to me in the past year, conversations with organizations that had that exact challenge. I don't know how to write a grant to get money because I've tried and I guess it's not good enough. So what kind of trigger words or keywords should I use for them to look at me? And so I think the need is out there to help. But that, if you'd like, by all means, send me an email to say, hey, great, I'm not sure if you're aware, but these organizations have, money that they're willing to give out to small businesses locally. And we can definitely look to add it to our website to help share in the interim. As Haley mentioned with this video project, it's going to take a lot of resources. So what we can do, and I know Haley, you're not going to be here, but if the committee wants, we can definitely, discuss this further at our next meeting. And then Haley, you'll be able to see the feedback in the minutes we can share. And then we are on hiatus in June until September. So we do have a couple of months to work on, consider, think about some of these items before we reconvene in September to see if this is the direction we'd like to go. Scripts and involvements and what this is going to look like, who's going to do what, and then we can kind of get the logistics done later this year, and we'll see where that goes.
Could I look into some of the things for you? I worked for community living for many years and we did a lot of things, and I could look into, I do a lot of fundraising. I just sat on a committee for a small organization in town. And within a week and a half, we'd raised $22,000. And I just think that there's availability to turn something into something very positive.
I
So
do
Joy-
grant writing for my day job.
Perfect.
What'd you say? I didn't hear.
She is grant writing for her
Oh, I
day
see.
job.
Yeah.
I'm a fundraiser by day for
Yeah,
Holland
yeah,
Bloorview.
yeah,
So,
do it
so
too, so-
absolutely, if Joanne, if you wanted to,
I can look into it and just tell you what I find.
yeah, bring a list for our next meeting. And then we can definitely take those notes, and then we'll see what we can do for that.
We all
to
find
help
something that will be worth it.
I'm conscious of time, so I don't want to open up a whole new can of worms here, but it's kind of an interesting thing that several of these ideas converged on. That for all of the ideas that are being sort of thrown out here, we need to keep in mind there has to be inputs to those in terms of what community needs actually are. And like, I think it started with what Allison mentioned around, say, the issue at the theater that you don't even think of. You're going to end up in the front row, paying front row prices, and maybe also watching the show, with your neck back, and other small things that come up, the snow plowing issue, et cetera. So I wanted to ask, is there a formal way of collecting these type of experiences or complaints or issues that we can draw from in order to target some of these, activities or outreaches to the community, more so than just emailing the mayor angrily saying this happened? And, so I don't know if there's a channel for that, or if we could be the conduit for that somehow.
So funny you should ask. I believe I spoke to Allison and Haley as well. So based on that ONAP conversation, Rich Donovan threw out a comment and a challenge to us, and it's something that I'm going to look at to do later this year. And it's going to be quarterly open houses to our community where they could come on and just speak what they let us know what they want us to hear, speak to any challenges, speak to any positivities, learn whatever it is just going to be an open house. Haven't fleshed out what exactly it's going to look like, but it also is going to give us the ability to collect contact information, to collect demographics, and John, I think you alluded to, general numbers. Our Parks and Rec master plan, again, spoke to very general numbers. But what we would like to do, and maybe our feasibility study with recreational programs might tackle this for us, is to get exact Aurora numbers. I think what we need, and this goes, Peter, to your comment, what exactly are the needs? We don't know. So once we can hear those needs, or if you hear those needs by your friends, families, peers in our community, we can absolutely bring them back and have those conversations at this table. But one of the things I am looking to do later this year is to have our first kind of open house. We can run them quarterly, monthly, weekly. We'll figure that out when the time comes. And then, after a year or two, we will have a large list of challenges in our community, feedback, and also contact information. So when the next X master plan comes out, we know who to reach out to for feedback and information. And that's kind of the goal of doing that. So it might hit a lot of what we're talking about. For all we know, it might morph into small businesses coming on board and asking questions as well, which would be helpful as well. But it's in the works, Peter.
Great. It is 9 on the dot, but are there any more questions or comments around this for tonight?
This or new business?
Oh, yeah, on this item 7.5. Yeah, we can call a vote to put that forward. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? Right, that carries as well. So the last few items on the list, we have no informational items to cover. You have a new business section, which is a new section. And just generally, does anybody have any new business to discuss? Yeah,
I
John.
just want to get a number for facility
Sorry, John, you broke up. I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, hang on. There we go. And we get like a calendar for accessibility week, all the events and so on. Is that
I
possible coming up?
can look to get you something.
I just forwarded it to the group.
Sure.
Third period starts.
Yeah. Maybe we can add to our recommendations list as well. We need omnidirectional table mics for the for the chamber. No, I don't think so, Allison. I think we still have quorum. Haley, yes.
That, again, previous committee will have heard about this, but and I talked to Greg about it. Possibly, if we could talk about what's happening with all of the items that were supposed to have been bought for those accessibility times, if that could be brought up and looked at, and get an update on where that is.
I hope to have an answer in June meeting. I've sent a couple emails, so we'll see.
No other new business, then I'll put forward a motion to adjourn for this month. Moved by John, seconded by Max. And all in favor? Right. No one's opposed,
You
looks
just
like.
pass on that.
Okay. Right, well, thank you very much, everybody.